Gangadwila. I met him through email, actually. He reached out to me about a month ago by email, and he has his YouTube channel, which I'll tell you later about, called Practice Yoga. So he asked me to do an interview for his channel, and I was like super nervous. I was pretty nerve-wracked about doing this interview, but he helped coach me through the emotional journey of it. He was so kind to me. And so I said, well, can you do a lecture for my class? And he agreed. And luckily, it worked out that he's flew all the way from Ottawa. It happens to be in Calgary for a festival, some prayers for the temple. So after class, I'll be driving him back to the temple. So why don't we give him a warm welcome applause?
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Ho, for inviting me here to speak to you about something a little different than what I've been usually doing. So I normally do not talk about myself, especially as to how I got into the ordination and high ordination and kind of stuff. But I think they are very interesting stuff. Plus, I think you learned about some of the fundamentals of Theravada Buddhism, I guess, probably Buddhism in general. I guess, the concept like Noble Eightfold Path, and I think some of the historical places of India regarding Buddha, and so on and so forth. So, Dr. Ho invited me to talk about a little bit about how do I perceive Vinaya from a traditional point of view and from a live religion perspective. But I was thinking, because you don't know Vinaya at all, it's going to be a little bit boring. So I was thinking, why don't I talk about the doctrinal part, the Dhamma part first, and then get into Vinaya a little bit, and then to let you know how I perceive the olden day kind of rules Vinaya, and then how I function with that Vinaya. So this is my plan today, and I think after 30 minutes of time we can have a Q&A. I think there will be some more questions about it. I like to answer to those questions. Okay, so the topic for today's guest lecture is what is the way of life like for a Theravada Buddhist monk. So I am a Sri Lankan Theravada Buddhist monk, but I've been living in Canada for like 11 years. It's a journey, trans-provincial journey from Vancouver, Victoria, Edmonton, and then Ottawa. So this is how I've been living in Canada, in different temples. And I did a fellowship at University of Victoria about how to neutralize the bad karma. Like we always talk about, we have karma, we've been bound by karma. And in the popular use, they talk about instant karma. And I was talking about how to neutralize most of the bad karmas, with the purpose of letting people know that worry is not the answer. And there are ways to neutralize, but don't think that I'm encouraging you to do more bad karma. You can actually neutralize them later. That's not the plan. But looking at kind of a more friendly, karma-friendly Buddhism. And so what's the way of life like for a Theravada Buddhist monk? So let me start from what is Theravada? It's kind of a question. Anybody knows any definition or interpretation of what Theravada is? Probably something that you learned from Dr. Ho.
We haven't covered that.
No idea? Okay. So now, a lot of people don't know that, especially when they talk about Theravada. So we have this Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana classification. But sometimes they misunderstand Theravada to be the early Buddhism. So early Buddhism is different from all other Buddhist types. So we call early Buddhism from a textual perspective. If you know how to classify the text, we normally say Nikayas, that means sutras, Pali called sutta, doctrine, and then the Vinaya, disciplinary rules, and then the Abhidhamma. Abhidhamma means the higher uh, teachings of the Buddha. Now the problem is, how can we find out what seems to be the original teachings out of these things? So normally scholars have a consensus about the first four Nikayas of the Sutta Pitaka: Diga, Majjhima, Samyutta, Anguttara. They are to be the original, I would say, early Buddhism. You can't say they are Theravada, but Theravada people say that they are Theravada. But Diga, Majjhima, Samyutta, Anguttara, which is a classification based on how long is the sutta. Diga means long sutras, Majjhima means composite, like middle length sutras, Anguttara means numerical sutras, and then Samyutta means kind of, I would say, sutras on different people like kings, Brahmins, and all that. So we normally call these four Nikayas to be the early Buddhism. Now, the fifth Nikaya, Kuttaka Nikaya, the minor teachings, and Abhidhamma, they are clearly Theravada teachings, which they wanted to preserve, defend the early Buddhism in their own ways, plus the commentary literature. So I'm more like somebody who is not even focused on Theravada kind of thing. I'm more focused on many things. So I can say this is kind of a trans Nikaya perspective. And I'm actually espousing thoughts about non-denominational Buddhism, uh, where there's an emphasis on humanitarian stuff, like what exactly Dr. Ho has been doing on her PhD and stuff. You are involved with that kind of a tradition in Calgary. Uh, Humanistic Buddhism, like it's a part of Taiwanese thing. So I'm more focusing from Theravada to that kind of a thing because I wanted to look at these angles, rather focus on the conservative type of Buddhism that those texts only talk about. So Theravada Buddhism means that this text that were given after the four Nikayas, except the Majjhima Samhita, Kuttaka Nikaya, minor text, and the Abhidhamma. But the funny thing is that Theravadis, they somehow managed to give the authorship of all these to the Buddha. I mean, I wasn't there, but in the text they ascribed the Abhidhamma to the Buddha. You know, the Buddha went to the heaven, right, to see his mother. His mother was reborn in Pavatinsa heaven after 7 days of Buddha's birth. She passed away. Normally they say no other sibling can be born in the Buddha's mom's womb. That's a Theravada notion. So she died after 7 days. She was reborn in the Pavatinsa heaven. And it is said that Buddha wanted to give the best Dhamma teachings of him to her. So he went to a heaven called Tusita, which is not the exact heaven of the Buddha's mother, Maya Devi. But Maya Devi came to Tusita, and then he gave the Abhidhamma for 3 months. Now the problem is there are questions as to how Buddha went. Did Buddha physically go there? Did Buddha go there by his mind? So he has couple bodies, mental body, and the physical body. So if he had gone to that particular heaven with his physical body, uh, his body would have not existed after that because it's a different place. This is what we say when we die in Theravada Buddhism. Our mental body releases from the physical body, called Gandha, actually. And that is what is going travels in another person's body, not another person, another mind matter composite. Anyways, that's a different story. So now you know what Theravada Buddhism is, and you know how to separate out Theravada from early Buddhism. And Mahayana Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, they arose as a consequence of the split between Theravada monks, because they were all saying that Theravada monks said that this is the original teachings that what they know, and the Mahayana monks they said no, we believe something else, so they had a split.
Can you write down the terms on the board so we can?
Okay, that's a good idea, right?
Yeah. Like
This is the split, right?
Yeah,
To begin.
yeah.
So you have chalk.
Yeah, there's chalk.
Olden traditions.
Very, yeah.
That's good.
Vinaya, how to
Okay.
spell that?
Vinaya, yes.
Or
Okay. So Sutta Vinaya. Sorry about my letters, huh?
legible.
Manageable, right? Okay. Discourses. This is discipline. This is what do you call it? Piety, I would say. So that classification, how do we separate out early Buddhism from Theravada, has to be done with this one. So this has 5 books called long discourses. This is middle length. This is numerical portions. This is what you call sections. This is minor text. So scholars normally say that these 4 books are only the early Buddhism. And this book and Abhidhamma, they are Theravada. Okay. So Sri Lanka, I would say Burma and Thailand, we know that they are very vibrant Theravada communities. But there are differences, how they practice Theravada canon, and they have their own textualized canon. Like Sri Lanka has the Pali one, but Pali was the Pali canon that is in Burma and Thailand, they have different additions. So especially to the minor one. That is why I'm saying that is exactly a late addition. Yeah, you can see ghosts and deities and some of the supernatural stuff. I'm not saying that's bad. There are things to learn. Jataka stories, the Buddha's past lives, all that.
So Jataka is part of the minor text.
Minor text. So the number is normally 15 in Sri Lanka. It can go up to 17, 18, 19, some countries. They are adding different things. Is that clear? Any questions so far? Okay, questions.
Canon.
Canon.
Can you elaborate what a canon is?
Okay, canon is the textualized scriptures. Now, it is said that until around, I guess, first century, there were no books. It handed down through the oral tradition. So they were textualized, put into books in Sri Lanka. Yeah, somewhere in first century, I guess. So that is why we have to be very careful, because these books were prepared by not only the Arahants, they were normal monks and nuns, so they might have added something that is not early Buddhist friendly. So something to think about. Yeah. You don't need to believe everything as it is, but you have to sort of look at, especially these ones and these ones with these 4. These 4 are actually better. So yeah, because some monks were ordained from the Brahmin caste, so and then from the lower caste in India, when they became monks, they were trying to attack the Brahmins, higher caste, through the text. So that is something that we can see some of the sutras. They were trying to take the revenge of what they were having. So, anyways, small things. I don't think that all the sutras are like that. Yeah. Okay, if this is right, then we will jump into the Noble Eightfold Path, and I will try to find something to get into Vinaya. Oh, this is my design. I designed this one. Yeah. So do that. Okay. Any idea how can I zoom this picture from the keyboard? Control. Control plus C.
Control plus, like the action plus.
Actual plus. Ah, yeah.
Oh.
That's a good one. Okay. So, what did you learn about the Noble people? Probably from the dust. Can't help you. Yeah. What have you learned about it? So, anybody wants to say anything about the Noble Eightfold Path or what you learned from? No? Okay, so let me explain to you then. Now you can see this was the part that the Prince ascetic Siddhartha really wants to achieve, but he could not find out in his early years. Especially, he was looking at concentration, how to concentrate the mind. So he approached other, ascetics, especially the concentration in pre-Buddhist India was really good, but it did not touch upon the uh, enlightenment. So they were looking at a bliss out of the sensuality. Now, what they did was, let me write it down for you. So, okay, I can erase this one. Okay. So in pre-Buddhist India, uh, people wanted to find out the bliss. So what they did was they were trying to get into what you call absorptions. We call them in Pali called jhanas. So now, when somebody meditates in Buddhism, they normally get into jhanas. Okay? They don't enlighten in the first place. So there are 8 jhanas. Okay? First 4, they are what we call by material jhanas, and the rest of the 4, they are immaterial jhanas. We call them rupa vachara. Sorry about the technical terms, whatever. Rupa vachara and arupa vachara. So, during the pre-Buddhist time, these ascetics, what they did was, they are not Buddhist. They were trying to get in the first jhana, second, third, fourth, and then if possible, they get into fifth, sixth, seven, eight, and then that's it. And that happiness is what they were having. So Buddha was looking at the 9th jhana, okay, where there are no, which is called no sanya and no vedana, no perceptions and no feeling. That is something that Buddha was aiming at. So he reached the 7th jhana from one teacher before he became the Buddha, and then the 8th jhana. And those 2 teachers invited him to share their students and then to continue. He said, no, I want to continue my path. And then what happened? Then he was called by the 5 ascetics, those 5. They said, you can't do anything with these jhanas. You have to do a lot of, ascetic practices. You can't eat, you can't drink water, you have to be naked, and you can't do this normal life. That is when he switch over to the self-mortification. Self-mortification. So he spent 6 years of his time with that. He knew at the end, by giving pain to the body, nothing will happen. And then he also tried out the other one, overindulgence. Exactly this one. And he also found out just indulging my body will never take me to what I really want to. I should put them on the both sides, putting the noble import part in the middle because it's called the middle part. Not the synonym, it's middle part. So I put it put it in the middle. Noble Eightfold Path or middle path. Because Buddhism talks about the middle in anything, right? Now, this is a life lesson which I learned when I was small too. You don't need to uh, do too much of anything, right? You have to be in the middle, balance out the life. You study, be in the middle. If you do sports, be in the middle. If you have relationships, be in the middle. If you eat, be in the middle. Don't eat too much. Don't eat too less, right? So this is the fundamental theory behind this, but it has something much more than that. So what I did here was, once he found out these two extremes, can I ask you a question? So we started around 2:45.
We have till 3:50.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, we started at 2:45.
2:45. Okay. So he found out that these two are extremes, so I had to be in the middle. So this is what I wanted to be in my life as a Theravada Buddhist monk. I want to be in the middle of my life, especially middle of my everything. So I became a monk when I was 12, barely 12. So that was in 1997. It's been now 24 years of monkhood. And after spending a couple of years, I would say 7 years, I was able to receive the higher ordination. Then you become a full monk. Still, you up until 20 years old, you become 20 years old, you are kind of a novice. So you have to be, you know, surrounded by other uh, monks, especially monks actually in this case. And then I got the full ordination. I was a 20. After that, I had to be under my teacher for 5 years. We call it probation period. Then only you are becoming fully independent. So now this is the path that I was looking at. Now, which you call by Noble Eightfold Path, and you can see these are very, very. I think everybody knows these eight, right? I would say right view, right, we call samadhi, right intention, sama sankappa, right speech, right sama vacha, right action, sama kammanta, right living, sama ajiva, right effort, sama vayama, right mindfulness, sama sati, right concentration, sama sama. This is normal. Everybody knows this one. But now I'm trying to look at something else. You could see these three bars actually. You can see right view, right effort, right mindfulness on the left side, right? Buddha says that if you want to practice any of these factors, you must use right view, right effort, right mindfulness. Without those three supporting factors, you will never do any of these eight. Okay? And it is not like you start from right action or right effort. You have to start from samadhi, right view. Because if our perspective is not well, you can't do anything else. Let's say right intention, that means what do you call by three types of intentions. Uh, Intentions of renunciation or letting go, and then intentions of not destroying other people, and then intentions of not harming other people. So how do we separate out the, these two? I mean, there are people who have a lot of thoughts about sensuality, and then harm, and then hurt, right? So how do we separate out? Only by the first one, right? And then you need some energy, right? Without energy, you can't do any of these practices. So that is what we call right effort. And then you should use your supervisor. That means your mindfulness. You should know uh, the good time or the time of the particular uh, phenomenon on how you can put into practice. That is why you should have sammas sati. And these three are supporting all the factors. And then you can see the first two, they are related to wisdom because they are more mental stuff. And then the second three, they are related to sila, virtue. And the final three, they are related to concentration, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. And and this part is tenfold actually, not just eightfold, but that is only for the arahants. When they practice it, They practice it not as 8, but as 10. So this is what made me to think about this monkhood and all that. Looking at the Vinaya. Okay, so Vinaya, there was no Vinaya for almost 20 years of the Buddha's time. So he became the Buddha when he was 35. So until he became 55, he didn't start Vinaya because all the monks and nuns who were there, they were good people. But there were small things. But then when he was 55, he saw there are different things happening, and then he started the Vinaya. Now, Vinaya is very different from one tradition to the other tradition, Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Now, in Theravada Vinaya, we have four main, what do you call, rules, and they are actually ending your monk's career, called sex, not to have sex, not to kill people, humans, and not to steal, and not to say that you have attained spiritual attainment. So these things end monks or nuns' career as a monk or nun. That is in Theravada. But in Mahayana and some other Theravada traditions, they say, no, that doesn't end your career, but you are put into a separate disciplinary kind of a position. Uh, it is a bit different than the Theravada. And there are many other smaller rules. So what I understand about Vinaya is that Vinaya was laid out to unite the monks and nuns. And the most important thing is Dhamma. So the earlier one that I wrote. So Dhamma is the most important thing. But Vinaya was laid out because, Buddha didn't like that monks and nuns, they having different issues, especially the people, they complain a lot about different things. So I perceive Vinaya as something that has to be updated. That is one thing. But I agree with the like generally important rules, like what keeps you as a monk or nun. But there are many other things like money now. It's a big issue. Now there are monks who might not accept money, coins and bills, but they may ask devotees to send it through e-transit. Problem is at that time they were having gold that was a bit heavy. The money was a bit heavy to carry because of the material. But now it's different. The coins and the bills, they are not that heavy. But if you look at the money from that angle, it's a bit different. But now money has gone to different aspects, credit cards and all that, right? Bitcoins too. It's not about touching money. It's about attachment to money. This is my perspective. You may use it, but you are not attaching to it. And we have a nice term in Theravada Buddhism for that. We call it Nissarana Panya. This is very interesting. Nissarana Panya, how can I translate it in English? Nissarana Panya means you use sensuality. Because you have the required, moderate type of sensuality, but you are not attaching. And you know where to end, how to exit from that in the process. A lot of people they don't know. They are just infatuated. That's the problem. So if I bring the money thing here, there will be a problem. And if you take another one Vinaya rule, I'm not actually labeling every Vinaya is like this. I heard there was a British man who went to Burma in 60s and he became a monk, and then he came back to UK probably in 60s. At that time there was no temple for him, so the devotees, I think his friends, they actually rented out a flat. So he came in and he remembered one Vinaya rule, like a smaller Vinaya rule. You can't stay in a house where there's one roof and then different genders are living there. He said, I can't live in here. And then friends said, we don't, this is the place that we could find out. So there are some issues that whenever you bring that particular Vinaya rule to the modern life, you have to be careful about it. It doesn't, probably it was arisen as a request at that time. So those two rules. And then I would say eating after midday. Theravada monks. So they are not supposed to eat after midday. But the problem is, how do you find out the midday? Let's say there's a monk in Ottawa, and he's done his lunch and he's coming to Winnipeg. He still have 1 more hour. He's going to another city. He has more time. So how do you know? What if that he's on board in a flight? Where's your midday? Right? So these are the things that we have to look at. But there are fundamental rules. We have to respect them because that combine. So Vinaya needs a complete, revisit. But Theravada monks don't like to do that because they are in a kind of institutionalized setup, and they scared that they will lose devotees. So they want to run temples. So this is what I see. And also driving. In Sri Lanka, monks don't drive. Even in Thailand. Uh, there was one monk who made a petition in Sri Lanka. He wants to drive. Uh, and then uh, it was actually turned down by the home, giving a reason that the drivers are often insulted by other fellow drivers. So monks should not get that kind of a criticism from kind of fellow bad driver on the road. Uh, but when a monk is outside those Theravada countries, they do drive, but they have their own disciplinary, I would say, their own space. Like if somebody put it in the Sri Lankan context, a monk who has a real estate attached to temple, say coconut trade. Some temples have some coconut, so the monk would prefer to buy a lorry, like a big truck. So monk has to drive the truck. A monk who has a smaller temple doesn't like to have buy a car, buy a tuk-tuk, right? So this might not give the respect. So some view that way. So there are some issues. So we have to look at all these within the contemporary context. Other than that, Vinaya should be okay, but definitely it needs a revisit. Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much about my lecture. But now we will move on to the questions.
I have a question. So some of the rules, so the Vinaya, the monastic discipline you said is that historically monks are not allowed to touch money, cannot go in vehicles,
Cannot drive.
cannot
Can't drive.
drive, cannot eat after midday.
Yeah.
Are most Theravada monks still follow a lot of the rules strictly, but then you have you feel that it needs to evolve to the contemporary standards?
Yeah. Some follow, but the problem is, they don't get to enjoy the freedom of looking at them differently.
Yeah.
For example, monks ate in those 20 years before it was laid out. Because you know what happened? At that time, there was no power. So monks were approaching, they were on Pindapata, right? Arms round, because they don't cook at that time. So they could not find out the back door and the front door of the house. So they were approaching houses from the back door, and people were thinking like ghost or something. And they were scared about these people. And then there was a practical issue there. Complaints to the Buddha. And you better like not eat after midday, do more meditation, and you are not getting I would say lazy by the evening. So there were practical issues, but now there is power, so we have to look at it differently. And then the role of the monk and nuns have to be looked at differently because it's not the role that we had in that time. So that's the thing. But there are some monks who still go with those olden day things.
So is it an individual choice then, or more because of the group that you belong to?
Whenever the monk has more freedom, it's going to be an individual thing. But if you're still a part of a big crowd, big institution, it's go by a group thing. Yeah.
So if you were to take a meal after midday, no one in your group would kind of have complaint against about that.
Now the problem is we normally eat
Yeah.
our lunch well, so we don't need to. But it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But if you are part of that big kind of a place, it's going to be a problem. So respect that. But still, it uh, gives rights to different issues, especially if you are on a flight, then you can't request food at your time. You don't know where you are. What's your time zone? If you are between Pacific and Atlantic, how do you decide your time zone? So probably if you are a traveling monk, and yeah, so there are different things. So the problem is, do we go by a book? Do we go by looking at the book and the circumstances and looking at what we are supposed to do? Yeah. So Vinaya should be updated kind of. Dhamma you can't update. Dhamma is the teachings, it's the essence of the Buddhist teachings.
So what is the Theravada response then? Because in the textbook, the Mahayana always criticized Theravada, saying that they were not flexible with Vinaya. What is the response from the Theravada side?
Theravada itself is a conservative group. Um, Although we have liberal monks now here and there, but as a group, I mean, when we allude to a group, then you have to look at these big monastic institutions like when Ajahn Brahm was expelled from the Thailand, the famous monk, because he ordained the female, and then he actually ordained outside of Thailand, but then he was actually expelled from the Thai temple that he was a part of. So that's the thing. So there's a hierarchy with your group. Then they're gonna definitely pressurize on what you're doing. But if you are an independent person, you could sort of voice up and then speak up this stuff and do something without harming their sensibility. I firmly believe that we can do anything. I mean, especially the updated things without harming any of these people. But you have to find ways for that. Good reasons, kind of a rationalized reason for doing that.
What made you personally choose this lifestyle of
Monk.
being a monk?
Okay, that was in 1996. My grandma passed away 6 years ago. She's 100 years old. My family has a lineage to monks. So my uncle, my mom's one of the elder brothers is a monk, and his and my grandma's son is also a monk. So we have this kind of a connection. At the same time, she borrowed a book from the temple, Happiness of Lay Life and Monastic. So I got to read that book. So this was the initial impression that I had to become a monk. And I think looking at my mentality, impression about being a Buddhist monk back then and now it's different, but that paved the way for me to become a monk. Yeah, 12 years old. Yeah, it's a big decision because you have siblings and you never know where you're going, but you know that you're gonna be a monk. But leaving the house, it's not that easy, I think, especially in today's world. Yeah, sorry.
So, mentioned that monks don't have any attachment to family. Does that mean that but are you still, that you still talk to your family, or is that just like not attachment meaning you don't talk to them
I've been continuing with my family. I mean, sometimes they have this perception that when the family is close to the monk and they will motivate you to come back. In my case, is they are doing the opposite. They are actually, I always have the choice. Like you decide that you want to stay or come back. So I was motivated by them because when I was studying at my university, they were supporting and they were with me all throughout. So yeah, it depends on the family. Sometimes when you come from a very poor family, I'm not saying I'm not rich, but the family is gonna be something for the monk. So monk has to support them. Probably the mother, father, when they're sick, he has to. He may think he has to go and help. So there are reasons. There are monks that are destroyed because especially when I feel you destroy, you are very vain. You respect it. Now come back. But in Thailand, though, they do a ceremony. Uh, come back and back in Thailand, I think. But in Thailand, Thailand, Burma is different. They do a ceremony to withdraw. So, and especially in Thailand, I think, are there anybody from Thailand here? No. Okay, so they normally expect even a male to be a monk sometimes to be disciplined a little bit in your life too. So yeah, a good candidate. Somebody raised the yeah yeah you. Same question. Dharmic.
Right? Like against dharma, right? Righteousness. So like killing innocent people. Buddhist monks justified to kill like that.
To my knowledge, not at all. Bec- But you're right. Especially in Sri Lanka, it's kind of a very dangerous thing to explain a little bit more. Uh, Now, the Buddhism, especially in Burma and Sri Lanka, has been so much attached to the political power, and the politicians, they know that people, in majority of the people, they are attached to temples. So if the monk can politicize through their ceremonial activities, that's a good way to get those votes. So this happens, very unfortunate, and they might probably espouse violence, probably attack the minorities, probably. I don't say they do, probably ways how they act on these things, especially if you look at some of the elections happen in many countries. It happened. I think in Thailand, the monks can vote. They can vote. But in Sri Lanka, they can vote. Even there are monks in the parliament. In Sri Lanka, 2 months, 3 months in the parliament, MPs. They became MPs. Yeah, interesting. And I don't know how that applies in Burma. I don't think it is not to that extent. So they are not supposed to at all. In Buddhism, you can't even kill yourself. You can't take the life. Uh, so you can't even think about killing, hurting yourself. So
What do you do with people that are attacking you? Like
defense,
yeah, attacking you.
that's a good one. Yeah, in modern world, that's a concept. So you may have to use some force. It is not actually discussed that much in Buddhism. Uh, don't need to think that you have to follow Buddhism for everything. Buddhism is not everything. Buddhism it's neither a philosophy nor a religion, in my understanding. If it is a philosophy, it should have the elements of the Greek philosophy. If it's a religion, it should have elements of this Western kind of religion. It is a way of life. This is the perfect way of looking at it. But it is brandized into a religion or philosophy. So it is not. It's a way of life. So whatever the things you see in the books, they are only taking you to end life. And if you look at, okay, somebody's gonna come and kill what I'm gonna do, you won't find that information, right? But uh, but in the core teachings, you can't kill. Buddhism doesn't worry about the death. Because of the death, the teaching has come up. But Buddhism highly considers about the killing. You can't kill. But death is normal. That is why you have to become enlightened. And one more thing, before jumping to the question somebody asked. Now, the Buddhism in the Western world, and Buddhism, especially if you look at Sri Lanka, Burma, and Thailand, Sri Lanka. Now, if you say people meditate in Sri Lanka, only a certain group of people. But in the West, when you say Buddhism, majority of them meditate. So it's a big difference. It does mean that it's more ceremonial. That is what people have thought that Buddhism is not rigorous. It uh, does not show any rigorous claims. But Buddhism is a rigorous teaching. Buddhism says there is no self. It's a rigorous. It's quite a statement actually. There's no self, but we exist conventionally, but we don't exist ultimately. Yeah.
What impact does the Eightfold Path have on your daily life, and like to what extent does it affect your decision making process?
Yeah, it highly impacts because everything is rooted in our perspective. So samadhi is the first one. Let's say if I don't have the right perspective simply means um, 10 things. So it has things like believing the karma, believing in my mother is a special person, my father is a special person, believing in, I would say, spontaneous creatures that you can't see. The devas, the deities, and those beings are spontaneous, so kind of 10 stuff. So if you have the right philosophy perspective in you, then you will never have bad intention, never have bad speech, never have bad action, never have bad living, never have bad effort, so and so forth. That means it is the core thing. And then on a daily life, you start the day based on that right perspective, both on a secular level and a non-secular level. It highly impacts. So if you spend the whole day, you will know what mentality, what mood I should be in, what words I should talk, and all that kind of stuff. It is not only something that leads to you to enlightenment. It is a daily thing that you will see your success, your spiritual, emotional success.
Do Buddhists celebrate Diwali?
I'm sorry,
Do Buddhists celebrate Diwali? And
Diwali,
yeah, and when was the golden period of Buddhism?
golden period. I myself don't know about Diwali. Is today Diwali? Happy Diwali. Okay, so there is no. Oh, the problem is the ceremonial aspects came in after. You don't see ceremonial things in the four books that I call to be early Buddhism. Okay, so they have different things. Like if you look at the Bhakti Gita in Buddhism, you can see connection to carols. The Christian carols and the processions. Yeah, I remember when the Portuguese invaded Sri Lanka, like in 1500, there was a drought came. I'll come to your question with that. And and the Portuguese, I don't know, whoever, they asked the Sri Lankan people, we have a drought here. What can we do? What do you do? Like before we came in, before we colonize you, or we are Buddhists, what we do normally is that we bring out that big Buddha statue from the shrine room and we bring it outside as a procession. Then the rain will start. Okay, we'll do something. Then they have this what we call Saint Mary statue inside the church, and they brought it out, and then they brought it as a procession, and the rain started, right? So probably this alludes to something, the spirituality, when everybody is thinking something the same, when everybody is believing in something at the same time. Right? So ceremonial things normally come down that way. At the same time, yeah. So there's no golden period, I guess. I would say uh, probably the time that many Arahants stayed, that could be a golden period.
Is it like Tanjiro Buddha or somebody from
Even in India.
yeah, spread of Buddhism?
Okay, so we could say historically the Ashoka. So Ashoka's time, because Ashoka I think he constructed 84,000 temples. And because he killed many people and wounded many people, so he was very worried about it. And then he constructed many things and he sent missionaries to many other countries. Probably we can take it as a golden period. Yeah. And not as a philosophy though. It is something
Is it like a spread?
like a historical Buddhism.
How do you view forgiveness?
Yeah, good question. Um, okay, my understanding is now we normally think when we are to forgive someone, we are giving freedom to someone. But in my understanding, when you are to give freedom to somebody, forgive, actually you give freedom to you first. You forgive you first because you are letting that go. So in Buddhism, Buddha said that you should not hold anger. There may be some justified reasons for you, but it may be your problem with your views, how you interact with that person or people. So the real forgiveness helps you to forgive you first and then to the other person. And there are many other things with regard to forgiveness. Buddha says if somebody wants to forgive you, let's say if you're going, if somebody that you think that somebody who did a bad thing to you going to ask you forgiveness, you have to accept it. If you don't give it, you are doing a bad thing. So you have to accept that forgiveness. So forgiveness is such a very important thing because if you don't let go, then you are keeping all that unnecessary things and it will ruin you in the long run. So we have to heal those wounds. Maybe some complicated issues, but you have to start from somewhere.
I hope you don't mind me asking you this, but what if, let's say one day you decide like this lifestyle, like it isn't for you, like you want to start a family, are you glad to go back to your normal life?
Why not? I always have the entry point and the exit point. Yeah, but I'm so far good. I always have that. Yeah, but the problem is this question is not traditionally asked in Sri Lanka because people know it's a big decision. At the same time, it is not a choice to monks sometimes. But being a monk who is outside Sri Lanka and then more independent, I could answer that. But I could say so far good. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with my decision, what I took. Um, and-
Like, is there,
but I,
is
sorry?
there like a process or something to go back?
No, not in Sri Lankan tradition. So you just inform, your temple, and then uh, yeah, there are no hanky panky stuff with this thing. You're gonna say, I'm gonna go, and that's it.
But you can go back if you want, right?
Yeah,
But women can't.
Huh?
Women can't.
Everybody-
The problem is the nuns don't get
same benefits like the monks have. Like there's a big issue in Sri Lanka. The senior monks don't actually allow what do you call uh, they don't call them nuns, they call them like novice. So there's a big issue. They can't apply for a visa and they can't write exam. They don't have the right ID because what do you call the androcentric elements of this cohort, and they think that if we give the woman some chance, they might take over us, get our own thing. Yeah, I think there are good people and good monks coming up, but they don't have enough power. You know? So yeah, that's a big issue. Hopefully, things will be okay in the long run. And the female folks are very intelligent, especially with those folks who come to become a nun. That's the other issue because they can spread something fast. Some are very afraid of that. Somebody, yeah.
Yeah, what's a lesson that you think everyone could practice to make the world just a more harmonious place to be in? What's like a Buddhist lesson maybe?
Four divine abodes. Four divine abodes. That's the biggest teaching in Buddhism. That means loving kindness, compassion, altruistic, I would say unselfish joy, and equanimity. So these are the fundamental, we call them divine. They are divine kind of abodes, like ways of living. So yeah, should be able to be friendly with anybody, should be able to be kind to everyone, including you, and should be able to uh, feel the happiness of other people because we normally happy when only our people become successful. And then finally, the most important one, uh, being able to balance out, be in the middle of anything, like in the Noble Eightfold Path. So these are the most important supportives to have a very peaceful, harmonious society. But a lot of people they ignore this part and talk about only the enlightenment part. That's something we have to separate out. We have to find a secular Buddhism that makes the world peaceful, harmonious, and we have to let the enlightenment part open to those who are serious about it. So don't put Buddhism, whole Buddhism, uh, in a way that everybody should enlighten. It's a choice. It's a choice. It's not mandatory to anyone. Yeah. Any questions about Vinaya as we expected?
Can you write down the four divine abodes?
41 abodes.
Okay.
All right. Let me write in Pali and then English. Metta. This meaning has a problem translation. Is it why is it a hybrid term? Call it friendliness. Some people call it loving kindness. Because why do you combine kindness? Because the second one has compassion. Karuna. Compassion. There's something interesting here. Now, in Buddhism, this is the highest virtue that somebody can practice, upekkha. So, if you practice metta, and if you come down to karuna, that means you are a step ahead, you are a step closer to the second level. So that means you initially start from metta. That means you practice both meditation of loving kindness as well as you practice your friendships, your rapport with other people. There are people who can't keep friends, who can't maintain friendships because they don't know how to keep up, get along. That is in addition to meditation. Karuna means compassion. So the practice of compassion is kindness. You practice it with kindness, not as compassion. We call it, it is the higher version of empathy. So you empathize, you can't be kind to everybody, I guess. I mean, compassion in the bigger context means that you are helping that person. We can't help everybody as we should, so we are simply empathizing, feel like what they are feeling. So that's the minor version of compassion. And mudita is a step higher than compassion, which means you try not to be envious or jealous. Those are two terms, I guess. So normally we come up with jealousy all the time, especially this social media and all that. What we can see, we didn't see that much before. Right? We see other persons having different things than me, right? So when you practice mudita, you don't care that much. I respect. If I won't, I'm going to try it out, but you are not that much shaken by that. And spectra is the balance. You are balancing your mentality. So those people who are not balancing out their life, they are stressful, stressed, anxious, having panic attacks, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's okay. So these are called divine gods. The deities, the gods in Buddhism, devas, they are supposed to be the Brahmas. They are having. So we can be a Brahma by practicing this form, or Deva by practicing this form. Yeah, we have so many questions.
What do you do when you encounter negative feelings like jealousy, anger, sad, negative? Or what do you think you did?
Yeah, I have a method, like a shortcut to encounter such things. Can I use this? Okay, so when you're dealing with any negative situation, be that anger, jealousy, so I normally think to myself, there's something wrong with me. Probably the way I look at it, probably how I process that. So there's a method called brain to this is very Buddhist actually, which was espoused by the Insight Meditation Society in the US, but I can bring that to the Buddhist teachings very well. So R stands for recognizing. That means you have anger and you think to yourself that you recognize your anger. A lot of people, they don't know even they have anger. They are driven by it. They are governed by it. They don't know. So you first recognize, I have anger now. And then once you recognize, then you accept it. Accept your feeling of anger, jealousy, whatever, like, annoyance is right. And then this is very interesting. Investigate. Physically, mentally, emotionally. Okay, what can happen to you when you are so much angry? You see any differences in your body? You are having fast breaths and you are shivering. You see a lot of things happening within the body. You having a lot of breaths. In Buddhism, mindfulness of breathing, really the fundamental idea of that meditation is to refine your breath. Because the more you refine your breath, the calmer you are. So understanding the different patterns of your breath, then you can calm yourself very well. Because at the end, what happens to you is that your breaths have different variances. So that's the thing. So investigate physically, mentally, emotionally about that particular uh, thing, anger, jealousy, whatever. And then this is very good, actually. Non-identification. What does it mean? Anatta in Buddhism. We call it anatta. This is the fundamental teaching in Buddhism. Anatta means, okay, so somebody blame me for nothing, and I don't want to hit him back. So I'm trying to deconstruct me from the event. I normally construct, okay, I was blamed by this person. I have to take back, take revenge. So I'm gonna deconstruct from the event I'm here, deconstruct. So I have no connection to that. And you blame my previous self, not this self. In Buddhism, we believe everything is changing all the time. I'm not Chandima who came here now, so I'm different Chandima. Right? But give me the feedback. So so now to answer your question, so if you have anger, see, you recognize it, accept it, investigate physically, mentally, emotionally. This is not easier, as I said. It takes time to get used to it. And then finally, you are deconstructing you from that particular phenomenon event. So then you become a normal person. So this is how we deal with the very negative thought, emotion. Make sense?
Okay, so I think we're at time.
Yeah.
Minky, why don't we go around? Explaining things so well. So the students have a thank you card for you and just a small thank you card. We have some other gifts in my office. We're gonna actually go to the coffee shop, so if anyone wants to join us and ask further questions, you're welcome to. We're just gonna head over to, I don't know the name, but the coffee shop is in the library. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for asking questions. Yeah.
You pause that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I'll see.